Hi all, I'd like to do a little video series now on static versus dynamic thinking, and this is something I've knocked up with Paint just today. And static, I've given this very long arrow to indicate it's like, you know, you're looking at the pawn structure of the position, the slower features of the position like king position, and you might, for example, decide that you've got a 3-2 pawn majority on the queen side. So that will dictate, you know, a lot of moves to like exchange off pieces and get a winning endgame. Or you might decide to go for the king, which again requires a lot of moves. And you know, it's a long range vision basically, based on the slower features of the position. This is sort of static, strategic positional thinking in my view. So this is long-term thinking. And you know, on the two project examples I gave, you know, Cutoff, versus Botvinnik, you know, computers are better, you know, at dynamic thinking, which I'll cover briefly below. But you know, humans are better at, you know, looking at the static positions, static features of the position, because we've got that bird's eye view. So you know, we can look at pawn structure and weaknesses and think up very long-term plans. And this is where, you know, I've mentioned the notion of strategic crush. You can actually look at pawn structures, you know, check out the pawn structures video, and you can often get a feel for, you know, where the strategic pawn breaks will be. You know, how to get a more favourable pawn structure, like, you know, you might do a minority attack to isolate the opponent's pawns. So things like that are, you know, based on the very, you know, slow features of the position. And I've argued recently about the notion, even if you're assessing weaknesses from a strategic perspective, so even if you've got your strategic thinking cap on, you know, sometimes it's good to have the cynicism already that you know, you're not saying that there's a hole here and a hole here and a hole here, because you're ruling two of them out, because you're saying two of these holes are not exploitable because your pieces are actually over here. And so this embedded cynicism is taking account of what weaknesses, you know, are exploitable. You know, weaknesses in pawn structure in particular are still long-term targets, but you know, how can, you know, say double pawns be exploitable if you know, you'll be mated if you try and win the double pawns. So sometimes if you don't factor in the context, even when you're doing a strategic assessment, then it's sort of a bit academic. Now, tactics, which, you know, computers excel at, you know, I've done it with multiple little arrows to represent like half-ply depth search. So the computers look at millions and millions of positions very quickly with this half-ply depth search, and over the last, you know, 20 years, that they've been thinking deeper and deeper, even with this very exhaustive, you know, search, and they excel at the if-then type thinking, the concrete analysis. So it's based on the tactical features of position. So, you know, moments of little detail, you know, checks, significance, you know, little hanging pieces. They could be very momentary, you know, tactical features in position, which the calculation makes sure, you know, that you don't end up a piece down, or you don't end up getting mated, or there's this key check that you make sure, you know, you don't miss. And although we can't, you know, like computers, look at millions of positions, what we can do, and some authors recently have emphasised, you know, things like forcing moves in particular, where there's a guarantee of the next move in the sequence of the if-then we should, you know, perhaps look at the forcing variations at the very least to make sure, you know, we're not going to end up bad in a tactical exchange. So anyway, I've mentioned that computers are better than humans at analysing variations, so incremental depth. And the way I like to find resources, you know, I look at the seemingly insignificant details to try and see their significance. I actually wrote a tactics paper years ago on the Barnet Chess Club site about finding tactics, and you know, again, at the tail end of a combination, you might, you know, think you've won material, but you know, maybe you've given the opponent passed pawns. So without looking at the positional side as well, these things at the tail end of the combination, you could be giving your opponent a massive kingside attack or pass pawns or things like that. So again, it's like there should be an embedded positional emphasis, I believe, like there is with an embedded dynamism when you look at the static. So the static and dynamic, they're like two ways of thinking about chess positions. But really, you know, computers will always kill us tactically, dynamically. We have the advantage for the long range vision. But really, you know, you need both during a game. And the course of a game, the content of it, is something which Cutoff touched upon in his subsequent book from Think Like a Grandmaster, which was Play Like a Grandmaster. So this is like, you know, very, you know, high depth. This might represent over 35 ply. It's not an incremental. It's like a hyper jump of thinking, that you're taking slower features position and you're hyper jumping. And this is the incremental breadth. You know, it's very solid, but it's very slow to get the depth. And the computers will never have that intuition, you know, well, not with current, you know, technology, to look at the position, you know, like we do, and understand it from a strategic, you know, very long-term point of view. So within an actual game, and I'm going to load up a different diagram, which is this was an original diagram, by the way, and some original ideas here. I don't think I've seen them in any middle game books. If I haven't, they've seeped through my subconscious, then I apologise. So there was no intention to copy anyone here. This is just some thoughts based on the two projects that I mentioned about, you know, getting computers to learn from humans and humans to learn from computers. The actual pattern I thought would be interesting to observe. But in terms of the pattern, I'm going to open another file now, which is game nature, and this is a Cutoff diagram, kind of from Play Like a Grandmaster. And you may wonder, you know, why have I got squiggly lines here, a straight line here? Now, this is the start of the game. So the opening, the straight line means quiet, sort of manoeuvring type positions. The zigzags mean sort of tactical, violent clashes. And Cutoff was trying to illustrate that actually what he wrote in the first book, especially with this game type of a quiet game, is you wouldn't really be using the if-then type thinking at all. It would be strategic manoeuvring, like closed positions, closed centres. So you wouldn't, you know, it would be totally inappropriate to be thinking tactically when the position's actually kind of calm and strategical. But the game content, so may either be completely tactical, predominantly just after the opening phase, which is this bit here, or it could be completely calm after the opening phase, which lasts towards the end of the game. To the end of the game. Or you can have a mixture of content where the game starts off quietly but then violent and then calm after that. Or it might start off really, really calm and there might be a tactical exchange and then calms down after. But anyway, so the game content can also be represented visually. And this is something Cutoff did in his book Play Like the Grandmaster. So the key here is, one word I think comes to mind is survival. It's the game nature needs to be matched with how you're thinking about the position, because you're not going to survive in a strategic position with this kind of short-term, you know, if-then thinking. It's totally inappropriate. And you're not going to survive in a tactical position by thinking, you know, statically about strategic considerations, because there's lots of calculations you need to do, like checks, etc. And I want to demonstrate this in a very harsh tactical position, which I briefly skimmed over without being blinded to actually the critical resource which was anticipated by one of the players, and unfortunately by the other as well. So this is static versus dynamic considerations, basically, and how they relate to humans and computers, and how they relate to the particular content that you'll have in the games. And, you know, it's, if you don't use the right tools for the job, basically the right style of thinking to match the position, then, you know, you're missing the key things about the position. So anyway, on to a concrete example now of a dynamic position in the next bit. So bear with me, please.